here we are, just talking about books again. Hey there, storytellers, welcome back to my channel. Today's video, as you can tell from the title down below, is going to be my May wrap-up. And spoiler alert, it's kind of a short one. So, slowly but surely, I have been reintegrating reading and journaling and writing back into my life. Not so much the writing, but I'll get there. As I've adjusted to leaving one job and starting another and learning all that I have to learn, because it's a totally different field than what I'm used to, so there was a lot. But I have finished 3 books so far. I have, well, yeah, 3 more that are almost done that I will probably have finished by the 31st in a few days. So I do have a few days to fully wrap up May, but to have this video for you guys here today, I had to film it ahead of time. So I'm hopeful that I will get to those next 3. I'm pretty positive that I will. And then I have one more that is kind of my major hopeful long shot. Maybe I'll get to it if I'm really good about reading. So without any further ado, let's get into the books that I have finished for sure. First book I finished in the month of May was Kikis Delivery Service by Aiko Kadono. And I borrowed this from my library on audiobook, and it was adorably superb. For those of you unfamiliar with the plot, it follows our main character Kiki, who is half human, half witch. She's around 12, 13? One of those. And she's leaving home for a year to complete her training as a witch. It's their tradition. They leave home for a year and sort of hone their individual witchcraft style, and they pick a town to sort of make their own and make a place in, be the town witch. It's adorable. Most people probably are familiar with the film adaptation of the same name by Hayao Miyazaki, and I discovered this film. I say discovered because I've been under a rock. A couple of years ago, a few years, I don't remember exactly when, I kept seeing Gigi, the little cat, around in so many, like, sort of hipstery record pop culture type stores. And I was like, okay, I love black cats. What is this from? And I saw that it was from Kikis Delivery Service. So eventually I broke down and watched the film. And initially I was like, okay, I like it. I don't know if I love it. And then it stuck in my head. It's just adorable. It's so comforting. And the story is exactly the same. It pretty much followed the movie beat for beat, though I know it is book 1. I think there's more to Kiki's story. I just don't know if it's all in English or if it's in Japanese. The original story was published in Japanese, so I'm not totally positive there, but I would love to find out because it was so cute and so heartwarming, and I totally see why people love the film and the book as much as they do. It's so good. I highly, highly recommend it. It was a 5 stars, super quick read. I think I finished it in a day. I think you would finish it whether you listen at double speed or not. I'm pretty sure it was a very short little read. It's a middle grade, so just that one's perfect. Next, I read Someday, Someday Maybe by Lauren Graham, who some of you may know as Lorelai Gilmore from Gilmore Girls. It follows our main character, Franny, who's, I believe, around my age, like 26 or 27, and she is living in New York with 2 roommates, trying her best to become an actress. She initially wants to be an actress of the theater, the performing arts, and it goes okay. But she's also open to things like commercials and television gigs and films. She just hasn't had a lot of opportunity to do so. So it's her journey pursuing that career choice, but also her journey learning to sort of discover herself and live authentically in an industry that often encourages a little bit of inauthenticity. So it's kind of her journey to bridging that gap and accepting who she is as a person and sort of learning to redefine her dreams as things come along and learning to sort of embrace some of the things that life has to offer that she's kind of afraid to really embrace. She is technically in 2 relationships at one point in the story, and it's because she's kind of refusing to deal with this college boyfriend that's not really her boyfriend anymore, and this actor guy who's all cool and suave, but isn't really her boyfriend. Like, he likes her a lot. He definitely doesn't dislike her, but he's very much kind of embarrassed by her in public. Like, he wants to maintain his sort of single, elusive actor status, and so he kind of neglects her, and she's in this dual relationship for like a hot second there, while she's also kind of developing feelings for one of her other roommates. So we've got, she refers to it as a love octagon, and girl, it felt like a love octagon, let me tell you. That being said, I gave this 5 stars. Lauren Graham's writing voice is actually incredibly entertaining, and I don't know if it's because I'm just so used to hearing her as Lorelai Gilmore and then in her own memoirs, but she narrates her own audiobook for Someday Maybe as well. And she's a great storyteller, in my opinion. She's someone who takes the time to really dive deep into her character, even if it's just herself, and kind of leave you feeling like you know them, like you're best friends with them. And I think that's the magic of who she is as a person and the characters she creates. And Franny is no different, in my personal opinion. So that one was also a 5 for me. I highly enjoyed it. The next book I got to in May was a sort of nonfiction guide, basically. Let me show you. It is Floriography, an illustrated guide to the Victorian language of flowers by Jessica Rue. Now, this is exactly what it sounds like. It is an illustrated guide to the Victorian language of flowers. And it goes through so many, it's like, oh, I forget, a couple hundred pages long. And it lists the flower, its scientific name, it gives you the meaning, it gives you a short little blurb, a little paragraph or two about the origin of the flower's name, especially if they have like the fun nicknames, like, well, not like Forget-Me-Not. It's kind of in the name. But I'm trying to think of one. I can't think of one that has a nickname right now. But it also gives you recommendations for other flowers to pair it with in a bouquet, so you can sort of send those intentions, those secret messages to whomever. But yes, it dives into the history of the flowers a little bit in the sense of why people in the Victorian era conveyed emotions and feelings that particular way. I'm explaining this poorly. Basically, Jessica Rue details the fact that Victorian era society was kind of quiet, kind of closeted, and not, you know, a little repressed, we'll say. And it was frowned upon to overtly express one's feelings, especially to someone of the opposite sex. So it was frowned upon, and flowers were an incredibly popular way for people to express those emotions in a sort of visual, out there, confrontational kind of way without actually causing that kind of drama. And I love that kind of undertone to the idea, but it's just one of those kind of witchy nature books that I've always gravitated towards, and I loved it. It was a 5 out of 5 for me. I also really appreciate the art style and the different bouquets that are at the end of the book, so that you get sort of ideas for full pairings that people had, like a bouquet for marriage or a bouquet for mourning, you know, all those kinds of things. All right, so diving into the almost but not quite finished category, the first one I have is The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee. I explained the sort of synopsis for this book a little bit in my big haul video somewhere. I have no idea where it is in either of those videos, but it's in there. It follows 17-year-old Jo Kwan as she initially loses her job as a millinery maker, hat maker, and she gets rehired by a family she used to work for when she was younger. So she's dealing with the fact that she kind of has to go crawling back to this family that let her go once, and she has to deal with being the servant to the sort of obnoxious other 17-ish-year-old girl. I think she's a little bit older than Jo, who likes to get under her skin and boss her around. In addition to the fact that Jo has started secretly writing an advice column to the Atlanta Society in the South in like the 1800s, I think. I don't remember exactly when, but it's set in that time period in the South where there's a lot of racism not even hidden racism. There was segregation and all that kind of stuff going on. And Jo herself doesn't experience as much of it because she is a fairer-skinned Chinese girl, so she's kind of passable as white in a way. She is less offensive, let's say, to the Southern racists, basically, that she works for. Versus old Jin, the sort of grandfather figure that took her in when she was a child because she is an orphan and has raised her in place of parents. And Jo stirs up trouble in Atlanta society by writing under the pseudonym Miss Sweetie, giving advice to women to be sort of suffragettes and to sort of encourage people to examine the race issues a little bit more in depth, examine their prejudices and why they think the way they do, and to think differently. And so she stirs up trouble. She's dealing with the fact that she's employed by this woman that she doesn't love that much. You know, it's not great. She doesn't like working for Caroline, who is her sort of direct mistress. She's hired by Caroline's parents, but she works for Caroline basically. And at some point she gets herself entangled in the web of the most notorious Atlantan criminal. And she gets sort of swept up into that world. And it sounds kind of convoluted because I was explaining it poorly, but it sounds a little bit more exciting than I have found the story to be. So, that being said, I made it through about 3/4 of the story thinking, okay, I think I'm gonna give it a 3. The writing was good. I didn't have an issue with character development. I felt like we really got to know Jo and what she wanted out of life and what she was thinking. It's first person, why can't I remember? Yeah, I believe it's first person. And I like that. I felt like we got to really experience the world through her eyes, which is what was important to the story. But it was kind of boring. I didn't have issue, like pacing wise, I was going through it okay, but like I said, I tend to not pay attention to pacing as much when I'm listening to an audiobook because I'm flying through it anyway. But even on this one, I noticed that pacing wise, it wasn't particularly beat for beat kind of writing. There was a lot of slow build, and that's fine, but it was a little bit too much for me. And now I'm at the last sort of quarter of the book and it's picked up in excitement, and I'm thinking I'm gonna give it a 4 depending on how the ending goes. So right now it's building towards a pretty satisfying ending, which is why I'm considering bumping it up. But otherwise, it's not, I don't think it's meant to be a particularly fast-paced kind of story, but at some parts it seemed a little bit too slow, even for me, and that is why it is currently hovering around a 3.5, and I might bump it up to 4, like I said, depending on how the ending goes. Next is Witches Steeped in Gold by Sian and Smart, and I know it is taking me forever to finish this book. I know it. I have about 130 pages left, and it's not for lack of enjoyment. I'm going to state that outright right now. I am enjoying this book. I think the characters are pretty well developed. I think the world is well developed. The culture of the story is well developed. It's all well developed. I like the writing style for the most part. Sometimes the sentence structure throws me a little bit. Like, how do I explain this? It feels like the author is using words just to sound intelligent and fancy, because that sounds like a knock against her. It's not. They're just sort of really advanced sentences kind of thrown in amongst ones that aren't less advanced. They're just sort of less glaringly so, if that makes sense. And sometimes that throws me out of it. Part of that is due to the fact that I would personally classify this as a high fantasy. It is an entire fantasy world and magic system and culture that is developed here that you have to learn and understand as you're reading the story, along with getting to know the characters and their motivations and what is going on in the plot. There's a lot of facets to high fantasy, and I haven't read one in a hot minute. I believe in my reading vlog, I was saying that I like Iria a little bit more than Jasmine, and that is still holding true. Iria's a little just she's a little bit more fiery and passionate and willing to sort of do what she has to do to reach her goals, and I appreciate that in a boss lady. Jasmine is coming into her own, but it seems almost a little bit too late into the game, and I don't know that things are going to work out for her. Like I said, I have 130 pages left. Who knows? Sienna and Smart could knock me on my butt, and I might be sitting there processing for weeks. I do believe, like I said, that it is part of a series, so this is book one. I've said it before, book one in a series is almost never my favorite. It's the one that gets me interested if I can manage to get through it, because I do have that issue with high fantasy series. The first one is always hard for me to get to, and it's the later ones that I tend to fall in love with for the most part. There have been some exceptions, but this seems to be following that kind of pattern where I'm enjoying the first book. I think I'm gonna give it a 4, maybe a 5 if that ending really knocks me about and leaves me kind of speechless, because I like when endings do that. That tends to be what bumps books up for me. So right now it is a solid like 4, 4.5. If that ending is fantastic, then I might bump it up to a 5. But I am really enjoying this, and I definitely do recommend it because it is such a unique fantasy world. It's steeped in Jamaican culture and lore, and that's just, it's everything. It's a fantasy world I have yet to experience until now, and I am enjoying it very much. And like I said, these two witches are working together toward a common goal of killing the Doyen, basically the empress of the island they live on, for slightly different reasons, but for slightly similar end goals, and I'm really interested to see how that plays out for them. The next book I am about a quarter of the way into, and that is World of Wonders by Amy Nezuko-Matatil, and this is In Praise of Fireflies, Whale Sharks, and Other Astonishments. It is her collection of memoir essays, each themed around a different plant or animal or object from nature. I'm already pretty sure I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5, in part because I feel weird rating memoirs as anything less, because I can't say they don't know what they're talking about. They're telling their own stories, so that kind of eliminates that aspect of it. And it's really down to how they tell that story. Do they convey it in a way that feels genuine and authentic, like you're really getting to know them, and not like they're kind of being preachy and here's my memoir. And I tend to be pretty good at spotting these sort of preachy memoirs versus the authentic, fun, kind of get to know you memoirs. At least for myself, my own preferences. I'm pretty good at judging them, and I already know this is going to be a 5 out of 5 because Amy is a literal poet, and I do mean literal. She's a poet, but you can tell that just from her prose. It is so beautiful, and you can tell that she really appreciates and strives to understand nature and incorporate it into her life and her being and her philosophies, and she conveys that in her writing, along with these stories of her childhood and oftentimes where that creature or plant sort of first came into her life and how it has inspired her and carried her through till now. And I just really appreciate that it's literally so grounded in nature while you get to know this author, and I recommend it already, and like I said, I'm only a quarter of the way into it. Last but not least is the one I am hoping to have finished but make no guarantees on, and that is I Want to Be Where You Are by Christina Forrest. I Want to Be Where You Are follows our main character, Chloe, as she sort of lies to her mom and says she's staying with her best friend for the weekend while she's secretly going off to audition for a school that her mother has already forbidden her to go to. Hijinks ensue when her neighbor Eli hijacks her ride and says, you know what, I'll rat you out unless you give me a ride down to my dad's house, and pretty much craziness goes from there, I'm assuming. Basically, Chloe misses her first audition, and I assume she has to keep going to more. That is all I've seen, is that something happened to cause her to miss that first audition, and now she's planning to go to the next one. I am only on chapter 6, so I am hoping, like I said, that I will get to this one by the end of the month, but if not, I will probably finish it up at the beginning of June. This one I'm really not that far into. I think I'm maybe at like 8 or 10%. Who knows? I'm bad at math. But I don't think I have enough of it to decide on a rating or even give you a gauge on where I think I'm going to rate it. But so far, I'm really enjoying it. It seems like a cute contemporary summary story. So that is where I'm at with this one. But that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by leaving a like down below. Next week's video is going to be my June bullet journaling video. And spoiler alert, this time I do have it themed around a specific novel. It took me a minute to decide on which one, and I will explain more in that video. So if you want to make sure you see it, you should definitely go ahead and click the subscribe button, and I highly recommend that you ring the little bell so that you don't miss a beat, because you're gonna want to keep up with me and all my bookish adventures and my journaling adventures and this crazy, wacky course of life that I seem to be on. Because even though I don't go anywhere or do anything, somehow my life always feels kind of like I'm in the middle of a story. How poetic. But that is it. I will see you guys in the next one. I post videos every Friday. Bye!